All right, we're back to factor some more of our perfect square binomials. So again, we have to check three things before we can factor it. We've got to check that we've got a subtract sign and that our first term and our last term are perfect squares. So look at example 4. Do I have a subtract sign? Oh, I don't have a subtract sign. This is a plus sign. So that means I cannot factor this. Again, it only works if it's a subtract. So if you have a plus here, you're just going to write the word prime. That means you can't factor it. That's as far as you can go, that k squared plus 25. There's not two binomials that multiply together to give me this. So it's what we call prime. All right, look at this let's look at example 5. Okay, do I have a difference? Yes, I've got a difference. However, when I go to look to see if 98 is on my list, is 98 on my list? It is not on the list. So I've got to ask myself two things. First of all, I've got to ask, well, did the teacher put it in the wrong place? Why in the world would she put this on the difference of squares if it's not a square? And then you want to ask yourself, well, did I miss something first? And let's talk about that because our 10-1 lesson, when we factored out our greatest common factor, that is what we want to try every single time before we do anything else. So if you have a binomial, before you even check to see if it's difference of squares, you want to first see if there's a greatest common factor or a number that you could undistribute. So look at the 98 and the 2. Is there a common factor? Is there a factor that divides into both of those numbers? Yes. Okay, 2, since they're both even, 2 will divide into both of them. So we're going to undistribute or factor out that 2. Again, you're still going to have two terms here. It's still going to be a binomial. You just want to make sure when you distribute this 2, you get back to 98w squared. So what do I multiply 2 with to get 98w squared? Well, 2 times 49 will give me my 98, and then I still need that w squared. Okay, do the same thing with your second term. The second term has to multiply to -2. What do I multiply a positive 2 with to get a -2? A -1. All right, now you can breathe easy because now we do have a difference of squares. Look, there's our difference. 49 is on the list. 1 is on the list. So now it's okay. We can keep going. We're going to factor one more step with this, but just don't forget to factor that 2 out first. So that 2 just kind of sticks around. It gets to stay outside of the parentheses. But now we're going to do this just like the others. We're going to write down our 2 binomials right here that this one binomial will factor into. Okay, remember, one's going to be a plus, one's going to be a minus, and then we just take the square root. What's the square root of 49? Well, it's 7, and the square root of w squared is w. So I've got a 7w as my first term in both of those. Whoops. And then what's the square root of 1? It's just 1. So that will go in the second place right there. Okay. All right, look at example 6. Again, when you go to look at this one, you could either start with the right step and say, what's the greatest common factor? Or you could look and say it's a difference, but 75 is not a square. And that should remind you to go back and to look for a greatest common factor. Now, when I look at a greatest common factor here, I look at that 75. It's not on my list, but I kind of look to see if there's anything on the list that maybe I could divide it by. Look at that 25 right there. So if I were to divide this 75 by 3 or factor of 3 out, I could get that 25. So we're going to try 3 as our greatest common factor. Okay, again, I need 2 terms here. Remember, so that when we distribute our 3 to both of those terms, I want to get back to this equation right here. All right, so either grab a calculator and divide, or somehow you've got to figure out what do you multiply 3 with to get 75? Well, it said 25. So 25, and then we need that a squared in there to give me that 75a squared. Now when I distribute, I'm back to this first term. What do I multiply 3 with to get -147? I need a negative, and 147 divided by 3 is 49. Okay, now it's nice because look, here's our 25 on my list. Here's my 49 on the list. So this is a difference of squares. We're going to go ahead and write that 3 out front, and we'll write our 2 binomials. Again, remember, plus and minus. I'm going to write them in a different order this time to show you it doesn't matter which one is which. But take the square root of the first, so square root of 25 is 5. Square root of a squared is a. So that's going to be your first term. And then the square root of 49 gives you your last term right there. And there's your answer. All right. Good luck with the assignment.